On today's show, NBA Finals Game 6. Are we about to witness a Pacers funeral, or can they hold on to force a Game 7 against the Thunder? Plus, the Kevin Durant saga rages on. Which team enters contender status by adding KD? It's all coming up right here at Locked On NBA Game Night.
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. It's the true NBA fans' one stop for all the action. Every game, every night. It's Locked On NBA Game Night. Tipping off now.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA Game Night. Every game, every night. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Joining me is my partner in crime, David Ramil, the host of Locked On Heat. David, are you ready to add Kevin Durant to the Miami Heat?
Oh, you know what? I think that's a distinct possibility, and one that we'll probably talk about a little bit later on in the show.
One that we will absolutely be talking about a little bit later on in the show. We're also going to have you covered for a preview of Game 6 of these NBA Finals. Will we be witnessing a Pacers funeral, or can they extend the series and force a Game 7 back in Oklahoma City? We're going to get into all of that on today's show. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On NBA Game Night your first listen each and every day, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. All right, David. Now, as we are on the precipice of Game 6 here in the NBA Finals, it feels like kind of this foregone conclusion that the Pacers are done for, that Tyrese Haliburton is injured, that, the Thunder have them on the ropes, that the Thunder have quote unquote, like figured them out at this point. And I honestly think that this Pacers team has been kind of written off throughout a lot of these playoffs. And based on everything that we've seen out of this Pacers team up to this point, I think it is almost basketball malpractice to write them off this harshly going into Game 6. Yes, Haliburton is hurt. And as we're recording this, the injury report hasn't been officially released yet, although all indicators are pointing to the fact that Tyrese Haliburton is going to play in Game 6. If he can move, if he can walk with any bit of ability, he's going to be out there to play in Game 6, even if it's just to be utilized as a decoy to take away some of the defensive oomph from the Thunder, station him in the corners, or, way out beyond the 3-point line to stretch out that defense a little bit. But I feel like the Pacers actually still have a shot here in Game 6. Am I completely off base here? Where are you at?
No, not at all. They were within single digits at one point through the fourth quarter. So it wasn't like, and we've seen this Pacers team find a way to bounce back and scratch their way even in far bigger deficits than what they experienced in Game 5. So they're absolutely capable of it. Maybe it's a bigger challenge, a much more daunting one, with Haliburton not at full strength, but certainly one that they're capable of. And I think even if you look at it from the perspective of, regardless of Haliburton's health status, there were things that they could have improved on. And I think things that they could have done differently and cleaned up a little bit, where they would have been likely maybe not necessarily guarantee a win, but it would have been a lot closer and much more challenging to the Thunder than what Game 5's result actually was. So I think they're absolutely capable of tying up the series, and a lot will depend on a number of players. And like I said, if they're able to clean up certain aspects of what what they did wrong in Game 5, and they avoid doing those, then their chances are actually, I think, pretty good. This is a team that has been very, very resilient. Maybe that's not my personal belief, something we'll talk about in the next segment. But at the same time, I think this Pacers team, to your point, has been written off far too much, disrespected. And that's just not who they've been. They've shown the capacity, they've shown the tenacity, they've shown the ability to be willing to take on these challenges and find a way to win, even when everybody else thinks, oh, they have no chance, or they're not that particularly good, etc. That's not this team. This team is far better than what a lot of people give them credit for. And while it just feels like, for whatever reason, even at the start of the series, everybody was kind of writing off Indiana. And then, slow and behold, they wound up taking an advantage, a lead in the series. And now that Oklahoma City's figured things out, it seems like the narrative is just shifting yet once again, where it's like, oh, now it's just things coming back to where they were supposed to be, with Oklahoma City proving to be the dominant team, et cetera. I mean, it's not like they've absolutely dominated them. I mean, sure, it was a pretty convincing result, but it was a lot closer. And I think one that would have been a lot closer had Haliburton been healthy and been able to do things differently and run that offense with the kind of precision and opportunistic talent that they have there. The ability to find spots where they can kind of just build something, gain momentum, and then find a way to crush their opponents. That's what they've done all postseason. That's what they've done all regular season. And so I think there's still a chance of that in Game 6.
And so here's my argument for why I think the Pacers are not as far away from. I don't think they're just going to this team is not just going to roll over and give up Game 6, especially not in front of their home crowd. That's not going to happen. We know for a fact that generally in the playoffs, role players, bench players tend to play better in front of their home crowd, and that's usually the case across every postseason that we witness. And so this is a Pacers team that has very much embodied the kind of strength in numbers mentality all postseason long. Right, their bench units have been incredible. That's been the deciding factor in a number of these fantastic wins, or these come from behind victories where you think they're done and then their bench comes in and it completely changes the flow of a game, sparking a comeback down double digits, getting them back in the game, getting them in a position to where their starters are able to close things out. Now, with last game, right, with Tyrese Haliburton really, not with, I guess let me rephrase, with Rick Carlisle and Tyrese Haliburton not really having the time to kind of game plan ahead of the game, understanding, okay, hey, you're not going to be 100%. How do we still utilize you even though you're not 100%? I fully believe that the Pacers are going to be able to come into this with a better game plan of how to deploy Tyrese Haliburton as kind of that decoy. Maybe they decide to slow some things down on the half court. Maybe they use him in some unconventional ways that the Thunder might not even have on film. That's the crazy part. Is Rick Carlisle is a very, is a veteran head coach. He's got a very deep bag as a coach, and it might be counterintuitive in Game 6 of the NBA Finals to throw something new out there on the floor and try it. But what do you have to lose at this point? Like it's throw whatever you think. If you can throw a wrench at the Thunder that they're not expecting, and be it, one, you can lean further on your bench unit. I really thought, TJ McConnell was so fantastic there in Game 5. I was shocked he wasn't out there to close things out, given how great he had played in that game. You also look, at the mistakes and things that the Pacers could have cleaned up in Game 5, the turnovers from Siakam, the poor play from Benedict Mathurin. You could have leaned on, a couple guys a little bit more here and there. And again, with Haliburton not really, them not really knowing going into the game how to counter, how to still get the best out of him while playing hurt. We've seen players play through injury before, and maybe not anything as severe as this calf strain that Haliburton's dealing with, but I fully believe that Indiana is going to come out and really, I think, maybe take the Thunder by surprise a little bit here in Game 6. And I could see this turn into a game where the Thunder actually start playing on their heels a little bit, because they maybe come into it with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, a little bit of an expectation. Yeah, you know what? This is like, it kind of feels like all the pressure's on the Thunder here to actually close this series out. That's what I'm feeling like going into Game 6.
It's an interesting possibility. I mean, we could talk about that in the next segment, but you know what? I don't know that I don't get that vibe that where they're kind of responding to it or looking at the Game 6 in that particular way. I think they're level-headed enough where they see that it's one game at a time. They know exactly where they were just a few games ago, where it looked like Indiana was going to be able to kind of, maybe even win the series a lot more quickly than a lot of people anticipated. So I don't think that they're looking past Game 6 or anything like that. And I think they're fully aware that they've got to bring their best game possible. And I think that's going to be what determines them as the heart of a true champion, in the sense that if they're able to recognize that when you're there, you don't play with your food, you don't mess around, you don't give them another opportunity, because this Indiana team is just far too good. And it has been in this position far too often where that would be the case. If they lose Game 6, if Oklahoma City loses Game 6, then that's a problem, because I wouldn't count on them being able to win Game 7. I would shift my pre-series prediction, and I would say Pacers in 7, because I think Indiana would go on to beat Oklahoma City in Oklahoma City to close out the series.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a little bit of a spicy take there to round out our first segment. Coming up, why the Thunder will close out the Pacers here in Game 6. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Lollipop. Look, Lollipop is a new kind of soda made for people who love the classic taste of soda, but want something that actually supports their health. With just 2 to 5 grams of sugar and 9 grams of prebiotic fiber in every can, Lollipop is reimagining soda in a way that's better for your gut. Traditional sodas are loaded with sugar, like 39 grams in a regular Coke or 44 grams in an orange Fanta. Lollipop flips that script with just a fraction of the sugar, no artificial sweeteners, and gut-friendly ingredients like OlliSmart, a blend shown to support digestive and overall health. It's soda that tastes like the real thing, but actually does something good for your body. Look, I've been a soda fiend for most of my life, just chugging cans of Coke and Dr. Pepper. And the moment I found Lollipop, I was excited because now I have their vintage cola flavor, and it's a great substitute for traditional Coke. It tastes awesome, and knowing that it's good for me is all the motivation I need to make the switch to have this in my day-to-day life every single day with pretty much every meal now. Get a free can of Lollipop just for yourself. Buy any 2 cans in store and they'll reimburse you for 1. Head to drinklollipop.com/lockedonnba to claim your free can and find Lollipop near you. That's drinklollipop.com/lockedonnba. And continuing on here at Locked On NBA Game Night. Thanks so much for making Game Night your first listen each and every day. For your next listen, go check out Locked On Pacers with Tony East, Locked On Thunder with Rylan Stiles ahead of Game 6 of these NBA Finals. Now, David, I know I've been pretty pro Pacers throughout this Finals experience, much to the chagrin of some of our listeners and some of our commenters on YouTube. And I will feel, even if the Pacers don't pull this thing out and have like an upset and actually walk away, the champions in Game 7, if they can just make it to a Game 7, I'll still feel pretty vindicated. But why do you think the Thunder are going to be able to close this one out in Game 6? How do you think they close it out?
Well, I think, they did struggle. I mean, SGA had some solid production overall, but not the kind of uber efficient line that we come to expect from the MVP. And so despite all that, they did win by over double digits, or won by 11 points. Anyway, that's what I meant to say. I think it's not that they figured out. I think that's a little reductive. At the same time, I think they've understood what the challenge is from Indiana. They've adjusted their pace and have kind of played to their pace. And we talked about this before the series started, that's something that Indiana had done so consistently. They've kind of used their opponent's pace against them and been able to turn the tables in order to establish their own rhythm to control the pace of each game and extend it out to a series as well. And it looked like that was going to be the case against Oklahoma City. I think Oklahoma City has figured it out and gotten their footing a little bit and understood. They just the timing and the pace of the series is back in OKC's favor. And we're looking at what Indiana could have done differently or better, clean up a few things here and there. That's kind of disregarding the fact that a lot of those mistakes or a lot of that lack of production from certain players was probably, if not inherently, due to Oklahoma City's incredible defense and playing at the high level that they did. So I think when you look at what the Thunder have done so consistently all season, what they've been able to do in the playoffs, I think they still have the advantage. They had the advantage before the series. Indiana, to their credit, has been challenging and very difficult, and they were never going to be an easy out. At the same time, I think Oklahoma City is still the better team, and they've shown that over the last few games of the series.
I think SGA stepping up as a facilitator, especially there in Game 5, and as well as especially just kind of in response to the struggles there in Game 4, right? Walks away with 0 assists in Game 4. Yes, they won Game 4, but it took a kind of a significant come from behind, performance, a little Pacers-esque from the Thunder, if you will, there in Game 4. SGA with those 15 straight points to close things out. Maybe a little bit of help from the officiating, if I will say so myself. But that'll be a low blow. I'm sure I'm just earning points left and right with Thunder fans. I like this Thunder team. I just want that to be on record. I really do like this Thunder team. Rylan can vouch for me. Go listen to Locked On Thunder. He likes me. But I want to say, the thing about where this Thunder team is at, right? First off, I want to give you a lot of credit. You called J-Dub breaking out in this series, and he's been nothing short of phenomenal here in these finals. He's averaging just under 26 points per game, 5.5 rebounds, 4.2 assists, doing it on, relatively solid efficiency. and stepping up the way that he did there in game 5, right? That pivotal game 5 to take the 3-2 series lead, which that's the game that decides so many of these series. For him to come out 40 points, 14 of 25 shooting, getting downhill almost at will, finishing at the rim, those turnaround middies. Pacers defense just had zero answer for him. And the way that I look at it is, this Thunder team, they can rely on SGA pretty much every single night, right? SGA is the MVP for a reason. He's wildly, I was going to say, I'm so used to saying wildly inconsistent, but he's wildly consistent. Like, he's so good at delivering. Like, that's who he is. And he finds a way to produce, whether it's by getting to the free throw line, whether it's by getting to the mid range where he's so lethal, even involving teammates, right? 10 assists here in game 5, again, after having 0 in game 4. I think you can count on SGA's production. And for the most part, J-Dub has been very solid. That 40 piece is inflating his numbers maybe a little bit here in the finals, his overall averages, but you need that extra offensive punch from somebody on the Thunder. And I think that's the danger zone, I think, for OKC that they sometimes find themselves in, right? What was it? It was game 3 that they wound up. No, I apologize. It was game 4, right? Where they wound up only hitting like 3 3-pointers. Something ridiculous like that. I think it was game 4. I want to double check my math on that. Yeah, game 4. They only hit 3 of 16 from long distance, 18.8%. I think that the volatility of some of the shooting with the Thunder is a bit of a concern. And I think that's, a possibility of that to dry up. And if you have that happen, if the 3-point shooting dries up, or you don't get that added, stellar performance alongside SGA's 30 plus that he's basically you penciling him in for 30 plus on any given game. That's where I think you hit the danger zone if you're the Thunder. And I don't think that, unfortunately, is not something that is about the Pacers, right? That's about the Thunder. And those are games that we've seen happen in these playoffs. And it wouldn't be completely out of the realm of possibility for, the pressure, the crowd on the road, in game 6, an incredibly young team, hasn't been there before, right? A chance to close out the Pacers and win their first NBA championship. Like, that's a lot. There's a lot riding on the line in this game. And I could see that kind of pressure being the thing that might get to this Thunder team and could be the difference maker, in addition to, right, the Pacers having that home court advantage, having their role players playing out of their minds because they're playing in front of their home crowd, not on the road, all these kinds of things. And that's where I'm not ready to go into this game feeling like the Thunder are going to come away with the win. I think it's going to be just like every other game in the series. I think it's going to come down to the wire. I think it's going to be a razor thin margin at the end, and we might even walk away with a game winner. And I'm not sure which way it's going to go, because if Tyrese Haliburton was healthy, I'd feel very comfortable in saying that he's going to hit it, since he's been the most clutch player this entire postseason. But he just right now looks like a shell of his former self, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think I think it's a good call. The bench units swinging one way or the other will probably decide the outcome tomorrow, and therefore possibly defining the championship. Because if Oklahoma City can get the kind of productions that they have gotten from a couple of their players off the bench, then that certainly favors them, because you feel pretty comfortable that somebody alongside SGA is going to find a way to pop, whether it's J-Dub or somebody else. You're going to get some contribution there. I feel like that's going to be the case. And at the same time, with Indiana getting the kind of production that they got, is there going to be enough from, say, Pascal Siakam, or is it going to be Haliburton? Because I don't know where that production is going to come from. Ironically enough, I don't know where it's going to come from in their starting group. It seems like it's, could Mathurin be that guy where he winds up stepping up and having those big games? It's going to be, Nesmith as a starter. There's got to be some kind of X factor offensively for Indiana, and I just don't know that they have that in them, because, again, Oklahoma City's defense has been so good throughout the year, and I think they'll find a way to take those options away from Indiana if they don't have to focus on Haliburton. So there's a lot. To me, I feel pretty strongly that OKC is going to win Game 6, but to your point, I do believe that the Pacers have a pretty good chance.
Well, we are going to have you covered for the aftermath of this Game 6. Will it be a Pacers funeral, or will Indiana be celebrating as they force potentially a Game 7 back in Oklahoma City? Of course, we'll have you covered for that right here on Locked On NBA Game Night right after the game. However, we got one more segment here, and David's team, the Miami Heat, my team, the Houston Rockets, and a handful of other teams are all in these conversations for one Kevin Durant as the trade saga rages on surrounding KD. Which team becomes a contender by adding Kevin Durant? We're going to take a look at some of the options here in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Look, there's nothing like the NBA Finals, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere that you need to experience live. And this year's Finals has been nothing short of absolutely incredible. If you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app actually drop closer to tip-off, and with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. Game Time also makes scoring NFL tickets just as easy. You'll find great seats for as low as $100 thanks to their exclusive discounts. I'm already looking ahead at Houston Texans season right around the corner. Already taking a look at some Texans tickets on Game Time. They've got discounts, they've got zone deals, all sorts of stuff that you want to take advantage of. So take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And final segment here at Locked On NBA Game Night. All right, David. The Kevin Durant trade saga rages on, and my Houston Rockets, your Miami Heat are right at the forefront of a few of the teams that are heavily invested in the Phoenix Suns star. In addition to, there's also the San Antonio Spurs, the Minnesota Timberwolves, maybe some dark horse teams out there. Apparently, the Knicks are out of the running for KD. Let's start right here. I want to start with, from what we know about some of these trade packages that have been leaked, rumored, whatever, from all these different teams. If you put yourself in the shoes of the Phoenix Suns right now, it seems like their MO is that they want to remain competitive with Devin Booker. They've used the language like retooling around Devin Booker a few different times. With that in mind, how do you approach this Kevin Durant trade, and who do you think right now has potentially the best offer in a KD return, assuming that's the goal of this Phoenix Suns organization?
Yeah, I don't know the exact packages being offered, because I feel like everybody's kind of in the same boat where they see KD as somewhat of a depreciated asset, certainly because you feel Phoenix is kind of up against the wall and having to make a move, whereas the teams that are vying for him would love to add Kevin Durant, but it almost feels like that's just kind of an added bonus, which is tough to say about a Hall of Fame all-time great like KD, and yet that's kind of where we're at. It's like, he's Phoenix's problem. They've got to be the ones to find a way to clear him, and I think they want to do right by him and getting him to a team that he would prefer playing for. But I don't think any team has to bend over backwards in order to try and acquire him. That being the case, it almost feels like, and we saw this with the Dame Lillard trade as well, it almost feels like it's going to be some dark horse team that you don't really see right now kind of swooping in, being like, you know what, I'm not going to lowball you. I'm going to add that one extra, whatever it might be, whether it's the nice young prospect or the extra pick or whatever it is that finally sways Phoenix and says, you know what, we want to do business with them. Sorry, you guys. Sorry, San Antonio. Sorry, Houston. Sorry, Miami. You didn't give us your best offers right away. Now we're going to work with these guys instead, because it just kind of feels that way. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it's. I like Miami's chances. I understand Houston has a pretty competitive deal in place. It feels like San Antonio has gone a little lukewarm in terms of their pursuit. I don't know, but it also feels like there's going to be some other additional team that we can't see right now, kind of saying, you know what, let's just push all our chips into the table and see what we can do to get KD, because we think he can add something to our team, and whatever team that might be.
Well, Minnesota right now, at least the offer that has been reported by a number of decent sources is, putting forth Gobert and Dante DiVincenzo on the table. And then the one swing piece that the Phoenix Suns really want is Rob Dillingham. Now that's even not including Dillingham, right? Putting forth, multi-time DPOY Rudy Gobert and one of your significant depth pieces in DiVincenzo. That's a pretty steep price to pay for KD, not including, any potential draft assets or any other, pieces coming back. But even just those two pieces, I think that is maybe the most enticing offer right out of the gate for Phoenix, assuming they want to stay competitive with Devin Booker. Sorry, go ahead.
But isn't the sticking point that Kevin Durant has no interest in re-signing with Minnesota long term?
Yes, and that's that therein lies the issue. And this is where I'm glad you bring up like the Damian Lillard saga, right? Because it kind of feels like the position that the Phoenix Suns are in right now is they're just sitting there hoping and praying and waiting and begging KD to expand his list of preferred teams, because at the end of the day, you're right, they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place in wanting to do what is best for their organization, but also wanting to try and do right by KD so that they don't piss off a future Hall of Famer on his way out the door, because that's the kind of move that suddenly gets players talking, it gets agents talking, and then suddenly nobody wants to go to Phoenix. Nobody wants to play for Phoenix because of how they handled KD during his, final stint there. And to be fair, they're already in some pretty hot water with KD and his camp, with kind of blindsiding him by trying to canvass the trade market, with him this past NBA trade deadline, and, trying to potentially send him back to Golden State. And then he was like, no, I don't want to go there. Right. That was kind of a whole mess, right? The Jimmy Butler mess and all that stuff. So at the end of the day, that Wolves offer seems really compelling from a Phoenix perspective. And then I think you're right, like the Spurs, the Rockets, the Heat, they have no incentive to outbid themselves at this point. Like, it sounds like each one of those teams have likely put forth a okay-ish kind of offer, but by no means have put forth what could easily be their best offer, right? There's certain swing factors, like for the Rockets, right? They're trying to, not include any of the future draft capital they own of the Phoenix Suns own future draft capital that they got by way of the Brooklyn Nets trade last offseason. So that's some stuff that Phoenix is probably trying to get their hands on. For Miami, right, Kel'el Ware is probably very much a sticking point in any of these trades. That Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo are certainly the untouchables, but that's going to be the one guy that Phoenix is looking at from Miami that they really want to try to get their hands on. And at this point, I doubt that Miami's included him in any of their offers. San Antonio's reportedly not even remotely considering to include the number 2 overall pick, because they're very dead set lasering in, to use a fun adjective, on Dylan Harper in this year's draft. So you come away thinking like, maybe it is just going to be a dark horse team. Maybe we see another version of like the Toronto Raptors, right? Some team that swoops in and decide at the 11th hour and decides, you know what? We know that KD might not re-sign here, but 1 year of KD to put us over the top is better than whatever position we're in right now. And I don't even know their assets off the top of my head, but the team that screams like a team that makes so much sense to go for KD and like try to go for like a one-off title contention year is absolutely the LA Clippers. Like, if they could somehow finesse a package for KD without one of James Harden or Kawhi Leonard leaving, then you get like another aging big three, third time's the charm with James Harden and Kevin Durant potentially. I don't know. That's the one team that screams to me like maybe they're the 2026 version of the Toronto Raptors.
I like it. It's a good call out. And yeah, you're right. I mean, there are a lot of other teams that could wait for the right opportunity, and I hadn't considered the Clippers, but I mean, you could see Ballmer trying to make a move like that, trying to go all in and reassemble a team that feels at least as competitive as any of those other groups. And they were a really good team last year. We talked about it a number of times during the course of the regular season. They had a lot of potential there, and they looked like a dark horse candidate in the playoffs and just didn't pan out that way. And maybe they're a KD away from being that kind of much more dangerous. Is that enough to put them in contention against, say, let's assume, and this isn't to write off, as we did earlier, the Indiana Pacers anyway. Let's assume Oklahoma City is probably going to win a title, even if they don't. Let's say as a Western Conference team that represented them in the finals. Do you think a Clippers version with KD is enough to beat next year's version of the Thunder?
I think it's entirely dependent on the pieces this is where, and look, this is something that the Rockets are struggling with. I know for a fact this is something that other teams are certainly going to struggle with. Salary matching to get up to Kevin Durant's $54 million salary is the hard part without gutting your current team. And that's the issue that I'm sure you're looking at. Like if you're the Minnesota Timberwolves and you're, hell bent on acquiring Kevin Durant, are you gutting your team by trading Gobert and DiVincenzo for KD? Like, are you still good enough defensively without your defensive anchor in the middle. Yes, you could just slide Naz Reid over and have him be your starting five and have KD and Randall as your forwards, and you still have Ant, obviously, Jade McDaniels off the bench. Like, that team is still good and talented, but are they good enough, right? Do you lose some of what makes you if you give up Gobert? And then I think the same can be said for the Clippers, right? The Clippers, one of the things that made them so fantastic this season was their defense, right? JVG stepping in and revolutionizing that defense and all the defensive pieces that they added around James Harden and Kawhi Leonard and everybody buying in on that end of the court. If you could get KD without giving up to like something like, it would probably have to be some combination of like, just looking at the salaries, right? Norm Powell, Bogdanovich, and then maybe some filler pieces. Like, if you could get away, I feel like you're going to have to throw Derrick Jones Jr. in there. And then you've got your big three with injury prone Kawhi Leonard and Kevin Durant. Like that is a ship that, when healthy, could look really good, but if injured, would flounder. And how many times have we said that about the Clippers in the past? So Clippers might be a team that's hard pressed to try and even just get to the salary requirements of a Kevin Durant trade, let alone the actual assets that Phoenix would ultimately want back in a KD trade. If we look at the teams that are currently heavily favored to land KD, so the Rockets, the Spurs, the Heat, and then the Wolves a little bit further down, those four teams in particular, how would you rank those four teams if you could just add Kevin Durant to each one of those? Like, and assuming
and based on whatever packages we know are likely to go out,
more or less, yeah. Like, just thinking about like the Wolves, you lose Gobert, you lose DiVincenzo. The Rockets, you lose, one of any two out of the three of Dylan Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr., Jalen Green, as well as some of that future Suns capital. So you keep kind of the ethos of the Rockets in place. The Spurs is kind of the super lukewarm offer, but it's, Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes, and then, like, I don't know, maybe Jeremy Sohan and like a pick or two, something like that. And then for Miami, what would be Miami's KD offer as it currently stands?
Duncan Robinson for salary cap purposes, because his contract isn't fully guaranteed. Andrew Wiggins, perhaps one of the younger core players, maybe a Jaime Jaquez Jr., and perhaps some draft capital, but that kind of, it's up in the air. So not a whole heck of a lot. They wouldn't have to give up as much, I think, in terms of what Miami has. But again, their ceiling feels somewhat limited just because they don't have the all-star. I mean, they have all-star players in Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo, and yet I think we've kind of seen what their ceilings are as players, and I don't know that they're going to be lifted all that much by a 36-year-old Kevin Durant at this stage in his career. So it's I would rank Miami last. I think I would probably have Minnesota third, just based on the fact that you're giving up an incredible player in Gobert and some. I mean, the loss of DiVincenzo to me doesn't feel like that egregious, so I'm not that concerned. I think it's Gobert that's going to be a major point, and then having Naz Reid slide in at starter, that's your defense is going to be so much worse, and so I don't like their chances at all. I think they're going to be taking a step back if they add KD. Then from there, it's a tough one because the big three, if you will, of De'Aaron Fox, Victor Wembanyama, and KD is probably better than anything the Rockets could put together. But the Rockets have so much depth and the ability to absorb KD, and he could add so much to what they were capable of doing last year. I could go comfortable with either one of them being 1A or 1B, really. I think you can't make a case because the big three in San Antonio is better, but at the same time, Houston's depth and I think their ethos, as you said, is much more complete and much more thorough. And I think Ime Udoka is a pretty solid coach who can get the most out of that group of players. And so I could see them being at the same level as even a top-heavy San Antonio team.
Rockets fans are fed up with the KD discussions, but I can't see how adding KD doesn't immediately elevate this Rockets team into contender status, because their biggest weakness this past year was not having a guy who could put the ball in the bucket when they needed him to. And that's what KD does better than almost anybody else in the entire NBA, even still at age 36. So if you can get him without giving up too many pieces or too much future capital, it seems like a slam dunk for the Rockets and something that could put them at least within a puncher's chance of giving OKC a run for their money next season in an already stacked and brutal Western Conference. But we want to know where you would like to see Kevin Durant ultimately wind up with the Phoenix Suns, looking to try and have him dealt before the NBA draft next week. So the clock's ticking in Phoenix. What are your predictions for game 6 of the NBA Finals? Will the Pacers be able to force a game 7, or will SGA and the Thunder be lifting the Larry O'Brien on the Gainbridge Fieldhouse home court? Let us know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. As always, thanks so much for hanging out with us here at Locked On NBA Game Night. For your next listen, go check out Locked On NBA, our midday show. We got 2 Locked On NBA episodes hitting your feed every single day. Also, for your next listen, go check out Locked On Pacers, Locked On Thunder, all that good stuff, recaps, boots on the ground, local analysis. And remember to help us grow by listening every single day, wherever you get your podcast, and subscribing on YouTube. Until then, we will catch you guys on our very next Game Night.